So, may I have roll call, please, for the joint meeting of Glendale City Council and Housing Authority?
Council members: Friedman, Garpetian,
here.
Najarian,
Here.
Sinanian,
Here.
Mayor Devine.
Here.
And authority members: Devine,
Here.
Friedman, Garpetian,
Here.
Kelly,
Here.
Najarian,
Here.
Parazian,
Here.
Chair Sinanian.
Here.
Okay, and our first item, please, our only item.
Certainly. Well, and just for protocol, I'd like to remind everyone that the agenda for the August 23rd, 2016 joint public meeting of the City Council and Housing Authority was posted on Thursday, August 18, 2016 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. And if I can ask everyone, please, if you have a telephone, please, if you would be so kind and respectful to turn it off. Thank you. Director of Community Development regarding discussion of strategies to address citywide housing affordability related issues. 1A is City Council motion to provide staff further direction as deemed necessary. 1B is Housing Authority motion to provide staff further direction as deemed necessary.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Najarian?
Before we begin, I must announce that I will be recusing myself from consideration of these issues. The reason being that I do have an interest in rental real estate, which may be affected by any decision that the council makes here and in subsequent meetings.
Thank
Is
you.
that correct, Mr. City Attorney?
Thank you.
So
I'm sorry. Can I just? I'm sorry. There are people literally on the phone right now having a conversation in the audience.
Well, I was just going to ask one more time to please turn your phones off. Please don't talk while others are speaking. Be respectful. I know we have, as I said, we have a full room tonight, and it's going to be really important that everybody be heard. And so please turn off your phones. If you need to make a phone call, please go outside and do so. Okay? Thank you. Report, Mr. On the first item.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
the discussion that you're going to have tonight is really the culmination of several months now, and actually a couple of decades, if not longer, because the discussion on affordability of rental housing in Glendale goes back to the first part of this century at least, and that was a discussion that was had exhaustively, ultimately precipitated the just cause eviction ordinance, among other benefits. But generally speaking, the dynamics here have been focused on the private market and what the market will bear by way of willing tenants and willing landlords. This past summer, it was brought up by Council and the Housing Authority Board to revisit this issue to see if there was any other way in what many people are deeming a crisis in the field of housing, to look at steps that can be taken by Glendale to alleviate the burden, if nothing else, on the degree of notice that residents in some of these units face as they try to make that rental payment. What we provided to you over the last couple of months has been rather sobering information that is contained within your staff report as attachments to tonight's staff report, focusing on the need for affordability, the relative lack of affordability, and understanding that this is not a Glendale-only issue. In fact, it's not an LA region issue. It's not even a state of California issue. This is something that is occurring across the country. At your last discussion, there were some additional, more focused comments by council members. We have looked at those and studied them further, as well as some of the testimony of the public, both landlords as well as tenants. And Mr. Lanzafame is going to present you tonight a distillation of what we have heard, both in the context of an 8-point plan that is before council, as well as some modifications, variations on the just cause eviction ordinance. So, with that, no further ado, we'll have Phil give you a staff report and then open up for the council's dialogue, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Ochoa, and that is a very good introduction. Kind of takes us through slide one. What I do want to emphasize is the objective of this plan that we have before you is trying to come up with housing that's affordable, not necessarily pegged at a certain price, but that is affordable to people dependent on their incomes in town. We talked a lot about a lot of different things, and what we have found and what we presented to you in past weeks, that there is no one solution to this, and most everybody that is studying this and analyzing this crisis, as we've been calling it, believes that it's going to be a multi-pronged approach. There are going to be several different things that people do in strategies in cities and states and even our country, several different strategies to try and resolve the issue. So we've got two things. We had introduced an 8-point plan to you, some items that would help alleviate and move us forward in terms of making Glendale more affordable to all our residents, as well as some of the ideas that revisions to a just cause eviction ordinance that might solve or it might move us forward to getting that more notice that we talked about. We do call this a crisis because it is. And generally speaking, there's just more demand than there is housing supply being produced. California's economy coming out of the recession has outpaced the country, and that means new jobs and new growth. That demand has now put greater pressure on existing housing. There are more jobs. There's more potential. People are moving out. We're even seeing millennials that are now moving out of their parents' house. We know they're staying longer. They're starting to move out and make that decision to be on their own. This has a negative impact on an already tough situation of supply and demand. But where we see people getting hit the hardest are seniors, under and unemployed people and residents. Again, most of the experts are calling on a multi-pronged approach, no one thing. These are the 8 points of our plan. I'll go through all of them. Then come back at the end. I'll list them again because we're going to ask you for direction on each of these. Is this something you would like us to go and pursue further? We have some very preliminary information about these, but we want to know if it's something you're interested in. We'll go back and take a look at it. The first is a development impact fee for affordable housing, very similar to the fee that we have for parks and libraries. We would need to do a nexus study and find that nexus between housing development and the need for more affordable housing. The allocations and priorities would be local, so they would be set by you. We've had some discussion on that in some other projects in the past. One of the key decisions to make is, do you just put this impact fee on new housing, or do you add commercial development? There are a few cities that have a development impact fee. For the most part, they've avoided commercial development, fearing that it would deter companies from moving there and taking housing that's actually needed. As I said, a nexus study would be performed. We could pay for that through our low and moderate income housing fund. And there's some other things that are going to need study that we could pair together if that is the interest of the council and housing authority. Inclusionary zoning, interesting one. The idea is to, whenever you build new, you have to include a certain percentage for different affordable incomes. The redevelopment law prior to 1994 required that in redevelopment project areas. I'm sorry, after 1992 it was. Required inclusionary housing. So every new housing unit was built had to have a certain percentage set aside for affordable. We adopted that in the San Fernando Road corridor where it applied. That is the only place that exists in the city. Since that time, Mr. Garcia can tell you more detail about it, but the Palmer decision was rendered, and this had to do with Costa-Hawkins and how much you can control the rent. The courts determined that you could not force a developer of rental housing to set aside at a lower rent housing. That ran conflict to the law. So what we see in most of the inclusionary housing ordinances, it just applies to ownership housing. So if you so chose, you could implement that citywide beyond just the San Fernando Road corridor on ownership units. There is some flexibility. I've used the term quid pro quo. I'm not sure that that's absolutely right, but in cases where a developer of rental housing needs something from the city, a change of zone or a PPD or something like that, you could, through a negotiation, say, all right, we would ask you to set aside a certain number of those units for affordable incomes and then make the discretionary approval. So that is a way that some cities are using the inclusionary housing ordinance to get rental housing. Again, something we can look at citywide in those cases. A lot of cities, including Glendale, have an in lieu fee. I can't even remember what it was. It was sometime between 2000 and 2005 or 6. We had adopted an in lieu fee. So rather than force the developer to include that in the project, they could pay an in lieu fee. At the time, there was no development happening at all, and it was the desire of the city council to offer some incentive for that development to take place. So the in lieu fee is set at about half of the need to build that unit. It's $17 a foot. We think that somewhere back then it was about $35 a foot.
So we have the in lieu fee now?
We still have the in lieu fee.
For the entire city?
Just for the San Fernando Road corridor.
For San Fernando Road, and it's ownership and rental?
Well, it's just right now would just be ownership. That's the only place where we can impose it.
So you cannot have an inclusionary zoning ordinance that's for rental property? I thought that there were cities that were implementing that.
I'll turn to my distinguished legal colleague.
So there were two issues that were sort of winding their way through the courts, members of council and the housing authority. One was whether an inclusionary housing ordinance was in effect a taking of real property, and the California Supreme Court ruled no, that it wasn't. And that involves San Jose. So San Jose only applies to ownership. As it pertains to rental, as Mr. Lansfame alluded to, the Court of Appeal in 2009, I think, ruled that the cities cannot restrict the amount of rent that developers of new properties, anything built after 1995, charges to their tenants. That's why you can't impose rent control, for example, on post-95 buildings. So as it stands now, we couldn't impose a inclusionary requirement on rental property, and for the same reason you couldn't have an in lieu fee that's based solely on the inclusionary requirement. Palmer also struck down that because the two are tied together. What you could do, the previous slide that Phil went through, was you could charge an impact fee if you went through the nexus study to do that. So until there has been some discussion since the San Jose decision came down, maybe the legislature would relook at Costa-Hawkins to override the Palmer decision, but that hasn't gotten anywhere yet.
How do you justify an impact fee unless they're removing otherwise affordable units? I mean, if you have an empty lot and you build an apartment building, how do you legally justify an impact fee for rental? Because they're not negatively impacting anybody's rent.
No, it's an impact fee that new development, whether it's residential or commercial, is generating a need for additional affordable housing. So essentially, you hire.
That's what I'm saying. How do you argue that they're generating a need for more affordable housing by building market rate housing?
They'll do a study so for example, if you build X amount, if you build at 1,000 market rate units, that number of new residents, some of those residents will end up working in Glendale. Some of those residents who are working in Glendale will then generate additional need for goods and services, which will generate additional work and additional employment. And for folks that make less than the median, there'll be a need for new housing for that.
That's how they do it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it's even more direct with commercial development,
right,
because now you actually have the job. Something like a mall, where you have a lot of service-oriented jobs that might pay minimum wage to $15. You would generate more need for affordable housing.
We don't have a transit impact fee.
We do not.
We do not.
Did you have a comment?
Yes, I have a question. So you said that we have inclusionary housing on San Fernando Road corridor?
In the old redevelopment project area, which actually still exists, the boundaries, we have within that area inclusionary housing. So if you build for sale housing, you need to include a certain percentage of those for affordable. We have not had anybody build. We had one developer build for sale housing long before we had put this in place. And we had a bank of housing that we could use to satisfy that.
So when you say redevelopment area, where does that cover? It's just San Fernando Road, or
it's
redevelopment area was part of downtown as well?
Yeah, the corridor, it does not include downtown. It runs from about Brand Boulevard, just a little bit past, and then it's a really jagged edge on the east side as you're going north on San Fernando, and it followed the zoning all the way up into the Disney corridor, and then all that industrial on the west side of the street.
Was the Americana in the redevelopment area?
No.
Not in San
The
Fernando.
Americana is in the central project area.
Central
redevelopment project area.
Okay.
Again, a consultant study would be necessary for this. We could pair that with the DIF, again, if you so chose to go down that road or at least investigate it. Continue our affordable efforts. This is something that we, it's a point in the plan, but we want to emphasize it, that you all have been very aggressive in doing the things that have gotten us a lot of this success. The VASH vouchers, density bonus that makes sense, making sure that it's spread throughout the entire projects. Restructuring the financing. You've approved restructuring two pieces of financing that have netted the Housing Authority almost $1.8 million to go into additional housing. So we would continue to do that. Continue to develop new projects as we can, leveraging those funds as far as we possibly can. The emphasis here would be on new programs and funding. That's going to spill over into the next piece, which is to really form a legislative platform for affordable housing. When the state of California eliminated redevelopment, it eliminated the second largest funder of affordable housing in the state of California. The first, the federal government, has continued to chip away at their contribution to that, to the point where there's really not a great amount of funding that's coming back to the cities, yet everybody acknowledges there's a crisis. So this piece is really asking for the Housing Authority to make a positive stand. A lot of the legislation that was proposed that would help redevelopment last year has been rejected. The tax credits got rejected a couple of years ago. The $75 transfer fee, which was amended ultimately to the satisfaction of the realtors associations, and there was a lot of support for it. That was rejected. Mike had mentioned some discussion about establishing law that would work around the Palmer decision so that you could have inclusionary housing for rental. That has died in session this year. So there's a lot of tools that would have been helpful that just didn't make it. I think from a staff perspective, advising you as the Housing Authority, the number one issue for us would be to return some level of funding stream to the local cities so that we can, again, start a program of developing affordable housing. That is missing, and personal opinion, I don't think that the governor is really intent on fixing that situation before he leaves. What we've seen is the idea was by right housing. That was the governor's idea to say take away local control, and if you meet code, you can build it. No environmental review, no local design review, nothing. You build it. The carrot that was put out for the cities was $400 million that would be split up for the entire state to create more affordable housing throughout the state. There was no plan as to how that would be distributed. It was one-time money, so when it was gone, it was gone. The proposal, the buy right proposal, just has not gained traction with the legislature, and so it's okay, we'll let it go. There is a bond that is being proposed, a $3 billion bond that would go on the 2018 election, and by that time, this governor would no longer be here. So it's kind of, there's not a lot of support from the governor's office for some of these tools, so we really need to hit hard to get some of that and have the legislators take a big stand on it.
And it's probably fair to say that it also point out that this has been the case since 2012 at least. It isn't as though these pieces of legislation are dying this year. They have never gotten ahead of steam in the last several.
One of the proposals that's out there is it's the old Alejo bill. It's called the Community Reinvestment Act, Revitalization Investment Act, CREA. What they did, the legislature did, is they modified some of the criteria for cities, but it's still predominantly for very, very poor cities, those that have a lot of infrastructure needs, and high crime areas. We're now looking at it, whether it even applies to any of our census tracts, that we might be able to initiate that program. So far, it doesn't look like we would meet that criteria. But that might be something to start with and say, let's modify that to be more inclusive of other cities. And it could be that it's just used for housing rather than kind of the old redevelopment program where you could do economic development as well as housing development. So this, your staff will be there. We'll do as much analysis as you want. But what we need and would ask of you as the Housing Authority and the City Council is your active participation. Go to Sacramento with us. Speaker Emeritus Atkins from San Diego is expected to be the senator in her district. She is one of the known champions. The other is Assemblymember Chu from San Francisco. So we would very much like to have our local representatives start to partner with those people working on affordable housing issues. And again, that is just going to be a lot of active participation on your part. We'll commit to do all the work, but we really need your voice there in Sacramento and with the legislators. Some of the ideas that you've heard a little bit about in the South Glendale plan is incentive zones. These are ideas that we have in certain areas that we would create a zone, we would put together some kind of incentive, and we're still working through that, how that might work. And if, at a minimum, try and get to workforce housing, what we call workforce housing. There are programs, the things that we're doing today, those hit moderate income that are 50, 60% of median income. Workforce housing is just a step above, where sometimes they may not be able to afford to either buy or rent the unit, but they make too much money to be included in one of the programs for affordable housing. These are teachers, these are entry-level firefighters, these are nurses, people that you want to have part of your community. So we will look at different ways, as allowed by law, that we can embed those into the South Glendale plan as incentive for developers to build that type of housing. A bond, as I said, the state of California is looking at a $3 billion bond to go to the voters. The city of Los Angeles is looking at a $1.2 billion bond. So it's an idea that we put out here. In this scenario, we would ask property owners to tax themselves, because they'd have to vote on it, so tax themselves, and use that revenue to service a bond. We've got a whole bunch of different scenarios if things were to happen, but generally speaking, we think that using $100 a parcel, $2 for every rental unit, and a nickel for every square foot of commercial, that could raise about $6 million a year. That could translate to a bond of $60 million. and allow us some going forward money as well. So that is something, again, if the council just says, that's not something we do, we won't look at it anymore. If you say, give me some more information on it, we can certainly look into it.
Question. The bond of $6 million a year, so continuously you get that $6 million for how long?
You could do it. There's a lot of different structures for it. Traditionally, 30 years. You could do the bond, and so people, again, would be saying, yes, I'll tax myself for 30 years in order to provide affordable housing in the city of Glendale.
So for 30 years, if you tax yourself $6 million a year, that's $180 million. And you post a bond for $60 million?
Well, that assumes that you don't have any discount for the time and use of money. Just like your mortgage, you buy your house and your principal is $100. By the time you're done paying it, you paid $1,000.
You get that $60 million in 30 years?
No, you get $60 million
up front, or you could do it in a series, and so it gets released over time. But the idea being that there is a large, because if we received $60 million in 1 year, you couldn't spend $60 million in 1 year doing housing, and so it may make sense. it may make sense to either receive it in time, or you structure the borrowing. As Phil indicates, there's lots of different ways if we were to go down this path to try to keep that money flowing. And as he indicates, after we get to a point where you have coverage on the debt, you would still have possibly some residual funds coming in that would allow you to do still more housing. And you would take that money and leverage it with possibly developers, nonprofits, other folks looking to do, in that case, rental housing, but you could also do for sale housing. Bob, sorry, just one to punctuate that and the previous item on the workforce investment. It does mean, because that $60 million has to translate into units, and those units have to go somewhere, that neighborhoods around Glendale would see development, new residential development in their neighborhoods. And so it's kind of an eyes wide open thing that we would do. It's great in the South Glendale Community Plan program that we're talking about it in real terms, but we'd also be looking West Glendale and far north as well.
These could be projects, though, that fit into what we'd called before the widows and orphans, and in places where it could be appropriate. We would also have the opportunity, because these are things that now you are influencing and you're directing, you could include amenities in there, like the small park that we talked about, like the small parking garages that we talked about to alleviate the congestion in the communities, in the neighborhoods. We also, part of the South Glendale plan, we could promote greater density. On this, we would really want to target these around existing infrastructure or expected infrastructure, whether those be parks or transit or something like that where it can be handled. We currently have some incentives in our lot width density bonus. And also the SB, what we call SB 1818 density bonus incentives for senior and low-income housing. Those exist today. We can even, on SB 1818, we can even elect to go higher than the state provides on a case-by-case basis. Doesn't always make sense when you're trying to do some infill projects.
Can I please have quiet? Because we're trying to concentrate on what he's saying, because we have a very important decision to make here. And if we can't hear him, Mr. Lanzafame, and catch all the nuances that he's telling us about, it's going to be very difficult to make a fair and reasonable decision. So please, I ask you to discontinue the talking. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in what types of things would we do? We might increase floor area ratio in these areas where we're trying to promote affordable housing. We might allow incentives for height limits. We might reduce parking. We have found that in our affordable projects, it isn't necessarily a 2 cars per each unit. So there may be the opportunity to reduce parking. One area that continues to get called out, and people think it's a pretty easy way to do it, is allow a second dwelling unit. In Glendale, we actually have prohibited that. But a lot of experts are saying, this is a fast and easy way to do it. People are building a second unit, and then there you go, you've got an affordable unit. I would caution you on that, especially in Glendale with the problems we're already having. A lot of times that second dwelling unit gets advertised on Airbnb and becomes a short-term rental and not an affordable housing unit. Unless you wanted to put affordability covenants on those, it would be very difficult to regulate. So as planning professionals, it's not something we would look to first, and it's not if we recommended it at all to you, it would be after a lot of study to understand what might be the unintended consequences of that.
A quick comment, because I keep hearing the South Glendale plan and transitional transportation housing. This is not only, I just want to mention that here, that it's not only a South Glendale issue. This is a citywide issue. So whatever we want to do, we need to look into the entire city, not just the South Glendale. I just want to
appreciate the comment, Mr. Garpetian. Through the South Glendale plan is the tool, the mechanism that we can use to address these, to introduce these, and then put them in all places of Glendale where they make sense. Thank you for the clarification. Finally, a business registration fee to generate revenue for an inspection program. We've heard a lot of complaints that, gee, I'm paying this rent, my rent is going up, and my unit is substandard. It's not decent, safe, and sanitary. We could use a fee to fund an annual code enforcement inspection. We would need to do it on all multifamily units. We could not just pick and choose which ones or those that complain. This would proactively ensure that tenants are living in decent, safe, and sanitary conditions. I had given you the example before where people had smelled an odor and called our office, and sure enough, our inspector had found leaks in their sewer and contacted the owner and got it fixed right away. This would be proactive to do that. Again, you would need a study to establish the cost. About 3 or 4 years ago, actually we looked at this maybe 15 years ago in the early 2000s, and the council at the time, they elected not to go forward with the program. We had looked at it, staff had looked at it, and we'd come across a budget. And when you adjust for time, this probably takes about 9 people, a budget of maybe $1.5 million. So we're looking at somewhere between $30 and $35 a unit per year. That would get us on a 3 to 4 year cycle to look at every unit. So again, a fee would be required on that. It would require additional staff. It would probably take 9 people to do that on a 3 year cycle. Yes.
So I have a question for you. I know that if you send an inspector out to a large apartment building, they're always going to find something, right? There's always going to be something that's somewhat out of compliance. But do you have any sense as to how many major violations you think that are out there that our inspectors would find? Because to me, setting up a program like this is not so much about creating new affordable housing, because it doesn't create any new affordable housing. So what's the need that this would be trying to cure? Do we really think that there are that many major violations?
I don't know, and I have my readers on, so I can't see if John Brunell is here.
But right now our program is request-based. So if any tenant who calls, we'll send an inspector. Now, how often does that happen? How often do we send inspectors, and how often do they find
John, you got an idea?
Violations?
Good evening. When a person calls in, we send an inspector every time a person calls in. And the types of violations can range from habitability issues, from no hot water, no heat, broken sewage systems, all the way to very minor issues like peeling paint, torn carpet, inoperable windows and that type.
And how many calls do you get on average a month?
We get roughly anywhere, say 500 calls across the board. A month for anything from trash cans being left out, brown lawns or noisy neighbors. And that from a housing standpoint, I would say maybe a quarter of those at most would deal with housing issues.
Okay, so this is talking about housing issues, right? So a quarter of those, so you're talking, maybe 100 or 150?
150.
And then out of those, how many of those are issues that are major issues that would help convince me that we need a program like this to make sure that units are habitable?
Well, out of the 500 complaints we receive monthly, we turn those around into maybe 100 to 130 cases started. So if you're talking housing, and this is just a guesstimate, probably maybe 50 per month in that.
So it sounds like with the number of calls you're getting that tenants do seem to know that this program's out there, that they can call when they have an issue.
Not as much today as it has been from, 2012, 2011. With the reductions in staffing, we don't do as much outreach as we had before. We had a whole outreach section that used to do a lot of outreach and events that the neighborhood services did on an annual basis. In addition to moving over to the MSB building. So we haven't got as many or received as many calls or services before.
How do we finance the program? Do we fine landlords if there's violations? Or do we just absorb all the cost right now?
We had absorbed the cost. And one of the things that John probably can tell you anecdotally is that when we had that inspection program, we were being proactive. We were catching things on the front end so you wouldn't have the code enforcement problem on the back end. And now we're seeing more of it on the back end and being reactive to it. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so if a program like that is something that you would like us to look into, we can do that. Again, fee study would be required, and if we package them all together, we could do them all with any of the other points that you want to pursue. Those were the 8 points that we had presented to you before. One of the recurring themes. I'm going to wait for Mr. Garpetian to come back because this is really his item. I'm sorry if you have to. But one of the things that we heard was that a lot of times rent gets increased. The state notice isn't long enough for somebody to make whatever arrangement they need to, whether that's to build that into their budget or go and find another place. So what we were thinking of here is doing some modifications to our just cause eviction ordinance. And again, if you want to do this, we'll roll out a whole program. But currently, our just cause eviction, landlords are given the option to offer a 1-year lease. And if they do...
I'm sorry, Phil. I have to interrupt again.
Say that in Armenian.
Please.
Բարի երեկո բոլորիդ, գիտեմ բոլորը շատ կարևոր հարցի համար եք այստեղ, շնորհակալ ենք, որ այստեղ եք, բայց խնդրում ենք, մի խոսեք, հանգիստ նստեք, լսեք, շատ կարևոր հարց է ձեզ համար լուծվում, խնդրում եմ, այլևս մի խոսեք, շնորհակալ եմ բոլորիցդ. Thank you.
Merci.
Currently, it's the option to provide a 1-year lease. If they do, there are certain portions of the just cause eviction that they're excused from. What we're proposing is that you require landlords to offer a 1-year lease at initial occupancy. This gives people at least a year of certainty for their rent. Tenants not wanting to commit to a full year and they need some more flexibility, they could say, no, I'd like a month-to-month, and then we base a month, or the arrangement would be based on similar terms as the year lease.
Question. For the tenant not wanting to take the offer, so a 1 year. So was this option in place, or this is something new?
Currently, the owner, the landlord, can offer a 1 year lease or a month-to-month. Currently, they can do either. The tenant can say, I only want a month-to-month. Then it's up to the owner to say, no, I require a 1 year lease, but that's a negotiation. Here we would be requiring initial lease up a 1 year lease. Again, it gives people a year of certainty of the rent, but it doesn't quite solve the problem of that second year when the rent does go up. Second option for you is that you could require landlords to offer a 1 year lease at initial occupancy with an option for a second year. So now tenant goes in and they know 12 months in advance what the rent is going to be in month 13 through 25. And they can decide to exercise the option or not. And you build in those terms, and it could be 6 months, 3 months, whatever.
And can I ask a question? If this is what we choose, the option for the second year, the rent schedule, the landlord can raise it as much as he wants?
Presumably.
Okay.
But you would know 12 months in advance what that number is going to be, and you can either build it into your budget, or you can make arrangements to say, I know it's going to take me 4 months to move, and so I can give my notice, and at month 8, say I won't renew.
I'm sorry, explain it to me one more time. So I come in, I want to rent your place. You give me a 1 year lease with an option for the second year, and you indicate in that option what the increase will be. Is that how it is?
Correct.
So when I lease the place the very first day, I would know what my rent is on the 13th month.
Exactly.
And I have a choice at that after my first year to exercise my option or not.
Correct.
Thank you.
And again, the idea is that we would give everybody would have advance notice of, look, I told you what that rent is going to go to, and you know what it's going to be. In the case of sales, which we see a lot of in their cycles, we saw it in commercial property as well. When people have owned property for a long time, they pass away, kids don't want to own it jointly, they sell it at a huge windfall. Now somebody's got to take a mortgage and they need to raise the rent to service the mortgage. Well, if you're in a lease, that lease is going to have to go with any purchase. So you would know for 24 months what your rent is going to be, and after, up to 12, you know exactly what you're getting into. A third option would be to provide an incentive for the landlords to give a 1 year lease with some advance notice longer than 60 days. And we'll have to come up with the incentive. But as we say here, currently the landlord provides if they offer a 1 year lease, they're excused from some of the just cause eviction aspects of the just cause eviction ordinance. We could modify all of this in conjunction with one of those other two to say to the landlords, look, we want you to give them longer notice than 60 days. Because again, the issue that we hear time and time again is, I don't have the time to build it into my budget, or I don't have time to make arrangements to move to another place. I'm kind of stuck when I get a 60-day notice. In 60 days, your rent's going to go up to this. So this, again, is an effort to try and stretch out that notice so people have more opportunity to make some kind of arrangement that suits their lifestyle, or their living situation, I should say. Lastly, I would just say that and I'm sure that we would do it anyway, but we have heard from several stakeholders that should portions of this move forward, they would like to be involved. We've heard positively, what's the word I'm looking for? They came to us to say, we really like to know the California Apartment Owners Association and the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles. I think, as I said, we would be going out with something anyway, meeting chambers of commerce, other tenant advocacy groups, and really kind of certainly the Glendale Association of Realtors is somebody that we would want to reach out to as well. So we would build that into time, again, should you want to pursue any of these and ask us to do that outreach. So these are the 8 points, and at the end, the just cause eviction revision proposals. This is kind of your scorecard. If you wanted to tell me what you want to do now, I would say great, and we'd close it up, but I know you have a lot of cards. And so if we could come back to this after you have heard from the public and those people that want to speak, had your discussion. At the end, we would like direction on which of these, if any, you'd like us to pursue.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lansfane, for a very comprehensive report. We appreciate it. But let's take council questions.
Just 2 quick questions.
Go ahead.
The first question is just going back again to the business registration fee inspection program. Can we, instead of having a business tax to fund that, can we have institute some kind of fines for certain types of violations that are more egregious so that we kind of make it pay for itself a bit and penalize landlords who are allowing their properties to be degraded to the point where we have to go out and enforce on them?
I think that's an innovative approach, but it's probably problematic in that the whole goal of code enforcement is compliance, to get people to comply. And so to the extent that our goal is to work ourselves out of a job by way of code enforcement, if
I understand that, but if you have people that are habitually committing violations, they're serial code enforcement customers, and they're clearly making their apartments bad for the people that are living there. I mean, people are actually having to live in these apartments. They should have some kind of penalty. It sounds like we have no penalty. If somebody is over and over again has cold water, no hot water, or leaks, shouldn't they penalize? The people that are living there are being penalized, having to put up with that.
I would submit to you that your cost would be constant, that revenue wouldn't necessarily be constant. And so to the extent that the city would be in a position to effectively subsidize that through good times and bad, such as they were, it would be difficult to develop a...
Okay, I understand. So it's not a replacement for that, but okay, let me put this another way then. If we move, whatever we do, I think that we should have some kind of penalty, civil penalty for owners who are habitually having code violations on their property. I'm not talking about someone who... I'm talking about egregious, constant...
But for all of our municipal code violations, we have both administrative signs and we already have civil penalties in the code, which we would be for the most egregious that we haven't used. So we already have that stream, and any fine or penalty has to be somewhat related to the actual, for lack of a better term, crime that's been committed or for the violation that's been committed. So it has to, within due process, it can't be so exorbitant that it bears no relationship to the act.
So when this
occurs.
Comes back, I would just like to know at some point, do we have those kinds of landlords? Hopefully we don't. Hopefully that's not an issue. And if we do, have we used these civil remedies with them? And so I'd just like a little more elaboration. And my other question is, so on your 8-point plan, you don't have rent control on there. So I just want to mention that and ask you, because I'm sure a lot of people that are here to talk about that. So let's talk about that now. Why is that not there, and is that up for discussion right now?
Again, going back to the very beginning here, the objective, as we discussed beginning back in April, rent control doesn't necessarily make it affordable. In fact, you will have people living in an unaffordable situation for a long period of time until they get into a sweet spot where rent control makes some sense for them and they're actually paying 30%. Now, assuming that their incomes are going up all this time, that's how you get out of that situation. Assuming your incomes are going up, you go through that sweet spot pretty quick, and then you're getting a benefit that warranted. It's hard to hear for a lot of people that are struggling with the rent right now. So it's not something that is based on your ability to pay. The 8-point plan goes back to what we heard from you. Your objective is to provide affordable housing for people. So we're not going to do it overnight. We talked about the need for almost 19,000 units if we looked at all our demographics. We won't do it overnight, but we can start making a dent in that. And in fact, this housing authority and this city council has been one of the most proactive in California in developing the types of projects that we would like to continue to do to house people affordably. That's the reason why it doesn't achieve the objective of affordable housing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lindsay.
I think that was I have to say that it's a fair point that I think a lot of people that are here are under the impression that they're here to hear, they are here to listen to discussion about rent control, as opposed to mitigating steps that address the underlying issues that are giving birth to the need for rent control. So I just want to make sure that, again, reiterate, the 8-point plan does not include rent control. And I think you just listed some of the reasons why, and I think those are, based on professional knowledge and institutional memory, I guess that's right, because other municipalities do have rent control, and are they not working out?
Well, it's not means tested, certainly, and so somebody with, as Mr. Lansfam indicates, somebody with an income that far exceeds what affordability would dictate may live in that rent control. I may live there for the next 20, 30 years. To the extent that, as the information, sobering and cold though it was, as we showed you over the last couple of months, demonstrates that some of the folks that are in most dire need of some stability in their rent are folks whose income have plateaued because they themselves are retired and living on some kind of fixed income. They might not ever even get to the benefit of rent control, were you to freeze the rent at today's levels, because it's unaffordable to them today. And so, for both ends of that spectrum of problem, rent control is probably the wrong solution applied the wrong way in Glendale.
Okay.
Okay, with that being said, any other comments? We'll go to the cards. I have about 25 cards. So I will give each speaker 2 minutes, please. Keeping in mind, if you will, that rent control is not the issue. But we're here to hear you out. So let's start with...
Madam Mayor, can I ask a question about that? Is rent control not an issue, meaning that it's not on the agenda, they can't talk about it?
Oh, no.
It's not being recommended, but if people want to talk about it, I think they can.
But we welcome them to come up and speak on that, that proposal. Okay, let's start with Margie Mahamah. Mama? Margie?
It may be downstairs, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
You want to call maybe 2?
Okay. Okay, we'll take the next one. Andronic.
Yes.
Tuchurgan. Okay. Is this? You're next. Okay.
Շնորհակալ ենք այս ծրագրի համար։ Ես երեքատ հարց ունեմ։ Սուկարանս մեծ տարի է, քանդվերը շուրջերը։ Եղտո ջուրը դուսակալի մաքրում եմ տանտիրոն չելասերենք, եկերը նայերեն, ասրեմ պետի սարկվա, սիտի կոմի, չի ուղայ։ Կաբինետնի դռները ամեն կոտրտվերը, թափերը թելով եմ կողքում։ Այդ երկու հատ։ Կարպետը 30 տարվա կարպետը փշելվերը, ասում եմ փոխի, ժշներն էլ ասեր եմ վեր, ամսի սրտի անանգիստություն գործողություն ունի, ալերժի ունի փոխվի, իրան ասեր ենք, ասում եմ մենք չենք փոխա իդեք։ Այդ երեքատ հարցն ունեմ, խնդրում եմ, վերջին ամառներինձի տվերը էսա։ Էս նամակը վերջին ամակնա տվերը, ասմակացվող տարի կկամ կսարկեմ։ Մանիջերին էլ ասում ենք, ոչ տանտիրոն շնոմերն է տալիս, ոչ ասեն է տալիս, ոչ չի։ Քանի հատ գրավոր եմ բերի տվերը մեր որդքերին, Իրանից էլ արդյուրեք ուղարկեր են, շնորհակալ եմ, եկել են նայեր են, գրեր են, գնացել են, բայց չեն եկել սարքել։ Խնդրում եմ այդ զուգարանի հարցը սարքա։
Ask a question.
Շնորհակալ եմ ձեզ։
Let me ask a question. Excuse me.
Be quiet.
What is your address?
Ադրես Glendale 243 շենքն է։ Adamsi վրա։
Okay, well, thanks.
It's not on the card.
So here's an example of where the resident is here to asking the city to address some egregious issues of the violation of the implied covenant of habitability. And really, I didn't hear anything about rent control, anything like that. So to the extent that we have the address and the pretty bad description that she gave is something we can send out our inspections to address, we'll address.
Absolutely. Thank you. Andronic? Followed by Pam Rancifer.
Good evening, everyone.
Taturian? Andronic?
Yes.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I can't.
Okay, so.
It's okay, go on at a
One of
time.
them.
Unfortunately, I can't speak English well, so I have to talk Armenian language. I am a single person. My income, my SSI money is 900. So I can't find any apartment less than 1,000. 10 years ago, I sent application for Section 8, for senior house, for lottery, but I couldn't win anything. What I can do? I'm not alone. I'm not alone single. There is a lot of single which has same problem. We're going to be homeless. Maybe after 2 months I have to move. What I can do after 2 months?
You got a notice?
No, but our contract was year and owners sold house and now owner is company. I think should be if give me notice or want higher rent, what I can do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your English is very good. Thank you. Thank you. Pam? Followed by, Mary Amerganian.
Hello, I'm Pam Ramsey here. I've been a property owner, landlord in Glendale since 1979, and I've kept my properties. There's pride of ownership, and they've been kind of my life, and keeping them looking nice and keeping good tenants. My rents are, I know, under the market, but I've wonderful tenants, and I purposely keep them at a good rate to keep those people with me, and they stay with me for 10 years, 8 years, and right now I'm always doing maintenance on the property, keeping it up. I live the properties are over between Victory and Lake, so probably you know that area. And for years, I just bought the paint and completely painted out the alley when the graffiti was there. And my main point that I want to say is that I'm kind of opposed to this annual code enforcement fee because we have neighborhood services. And it used to, I think people know that, there is somewhere they can call in Glendale. And also, we were talking about bulky item things. Just yesterday, I called and tried to set up an appointment. I know it takes time because our trash day is today, and it used to be that they would pick it up. I mean, there's stuff all over the neighborhood, and so I just wanted to point out that I called to try to have these things picked up around the neighborhood, and I know it takes time. So even though it wasn't today, because it was yesterday that I called, I mean, property owners, the managers of these larger apartment buildings put the trash out and they never call. They never call to have this stuff picked up. So anyway, I think that your point is very good, and thank you very much. That's my time, I think.
Thank you. Okay, Mary? Followed by under Nick.
My name's Mary Amerkanian. I reside at 215 North Belmont Street in Glendale. I'm here with 8 other families who are here with me, and they want me to do the talking on everybody's behalf. I have prepared a letter. I'll just read it so I don't miss anything out. We would like to inform you that our building property management has changed, and it's been purchased by Pacific Real Estate. Our rent has been increased by more than 10%, and we understand that there's no rent control in Glendale. But our building is not worth the price of the rent that they are insisting us to pay. The apartment complex was built in 1973. We do not have central air conditioning. We do not have luxury accommodations. And there are constant plumbing issues throughout the units. Tenants pay out of pocket for urgent repairs inside their units. They're also insisting that the tenants who remodeled and renovated their apartments using out-of-pocket money pay more than the apartments that have not been renovated. Our building consists mostly of families with small children and elderly couples, all of whom are not in condition to move out within the next 2 months. They're giving us 60 days to move out or pay the increased rent if they cannot afford to pay the increased rent. So we're asking you to please review the matter and reassure us of our rights as tenants and what we can do to help and change the situation. And we're asking you if the city of Glendale can send an inspector out to our building. Also, the new manager that's in the building, we are not able to communicate with her. She's not answering our phone calls. She's not responding to our text messages. We asked her to give the new landlords information. She is not doing that. I myself called the Housing Rights Center here in Glendale. They told me that if I call the LA County Assessor's Office, I will be able to get if I give the address, I will be able to get the new landlord's information. I have called them, but I was not able to get the information.
Thank you, Mary. We have your address, and I will give it to our city clerk, and he will make sure that an inspector gets out there and looks at the apartments.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I think this is a citywide issue that's going on.
Yes.
It's not just about rent control. It's about predatory rent increases.
No talking. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Garpetti.
I say about this predatory rent increases. That's the biggest problem that we have right now. So stop here and here.
All right, thank you. Okay, Andronic, number 2. And then followed by Miriam Bahumian.
Ես Անրանիկ Ծատուրյանն եմ, 1991 թվականից բնակվում եմ Ամերիկայում, 2001 թվականին հերթագրվել եմ Section-ի համար, ինչև հիմա չեմ ստանում։ Դա 15 տարի հերթագրված եմ, 70 քանի տարեկան մարդ եմ, ինչև հիմա որ 15 տարի չեն ոչ մի աջակցություն չեղել, սրանից հետո ինչ պետք է էլ ինչքան պետք է ապրեմ որ մե 15 տարի սպասեմ որ ստանամ շնորհակալ
Is he finished? Thank you. Marianne Aghumian. Followed by Nola Nahamazian. Nola? Yes.
Maybe you should ask the city clerk to explain. Maybe, one second, please. Maybe the city clerk can explain that we don't respond to public speakers, and then we'll make our comments at the end, so public would know what.
Կներեք, բայց ուզում եմ բացատրեմ ձեզի, որ հիմա council-ը չի պատասխանում ձեր հարցումները, սպասեք մինչև վերջը լրիվը խոսակ, այդ վաղ ձեզի կբացատրեն, okay?
Կներեք, ես հայր է խոսա։
Այո, համեցեք։
Մենք $1,000 տալի տան վարձ, բայց հիմա ամեն տարի 100 շատացնում է, հելել է 1,400 տան վարձ։ Այդ եմ խոսք։ Ոչիչել ասում եք բան, ասում եք կարող եք եթակ օտարտեղ։ Մերսի։ Շնորհակալ։
Moro Amazian. Could they be downstairs? No. No one's downstairs. All right, thank you. Rita Bagha Lucian.
Bagdasarian.
Bagdasarian. No. Well,
thank you very much for letting me speak. It's just I'm speaking in behalf of the Armenians that are here. I own condominiums, so I don't live in the renting properties. But the reason I want to speak up is because the rents went up here, all because of the these buildings, apartment buildings that started, and when the owner of the building, old buildings, they say, okay, those buildings get rented for $3,000, $2,500. Why I have to rent it for $800? That is the only reason. I know you guys have nothing to do with that. It's the other departments that give permits to those owners that even maybe they don't live in Glendale, but they build those buildings, and it's just their income for them. And it's not fair to all these people that renting here, and they have to pay higher rent because of those buildings. That's all I want to say. Thank you for letting me speak up. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Rosnik Simonian, followed by Hasimik Sukian.
Razmik Simonian. Razmik Design Razmik first.
Razmik Simonian.
Razmik.
Oh, sorry. Razmik Simonian.
Madam Mayor, City Council members. Last time I was here to talk about the rents in Glendale, that was in April 5, 2016. That day I described the rents as a fire in Glendale. And then I asked, who cares for the poor people? No one. Today I repeat the same question and ask the City Council to look into this matter. And I say to landlords, you can own the apartments and houses, but you cannot be the owners of the cities or the state, nor you can be the owners of the law. If you say, yes, I can have everything, including the law, by my money, then I say, remember, there is one whom you cannot be his owner, because he is the one, he is the Almighty God who created you and whom you must answer for your deeds. So, City Council of Glendale, if you cannot do anything to help the poor people, I am going to make request to meet Mr. Eric Garcetti, Mayor of Los Angeles. Do you allow me to meet you? If not, I make request to meet Mr. Jerry Brown, Governor of California. Do you allow me to meet you about this case? If not, then we'll stay one last chance. That is to meet the President of the United States. Mrs. Hillary Clinton or Mr. Trump, both of them are good listeners and they are ready to help the poor. After all, believe me, someday someone will listen to the poor voice. Believe me. Thank you.
Thank you. No applause, please. Hasmik. Sorkias, followed by Kachik Gazarian.
Sorry, I can't speak Armenian. I can't speak English. I speak Armenian. Ինչվից է, ես 6 տարի է, որ եկել եմ Ալամիդա ապրում եմ, եւ 2-3 տարին բավականին լավ էր։ Իմ վերևի հարևանը, որ լինի, տան տրոջ քրոջ աղջիկն է, շատ կներեք, իր շունը գալցացած իմ ցերնակի մոտ փիփիան, միզումա, շատ ներողություն։ Ես շատ եմ լվացել բան, հնաց ես մեծ կին եմ, ամոթ է ինձ ես բան։ Ինչքան ասել ենք, բան ենք կարել, անամոթ մեկին է։ Ինքն էլ տանտերը շատ ասել, իսկապես լավ տանտերը, լավն են։ Հիմա ինչ պետք է ես անեմ։ Ես ով տունս փոխեմ, ասում $1,100 տուն աբեք չես կարող վերցնես, հաուսինգը։ Ով ինձ $1,100 տուն կտա ինձի, ոչ ոք։ Մեծով խնդրում ինձի օգնեք, որ ես կարող եմ տուն վերցնեմ տեղից դուրս գամ։ Ես արդեն տեղ հիվանդամ, մեծ կին եմ, եւ իմ թոքերս էլ վնասված է, եւ ես դուրս ամբողջ ժամանակ կողմած եւ եղել եմ բանտարկյալ։ Ես մաքուր օդ եմ ուզում, բայց չեմ կարող դուրս բացեմ։ Շուն են դեկալցան։ Ախր ես ճիշտ բան, ես մեծ այս տարիքով կարելի է ասած բան, խնդրեմ ինձ օգնեք։ Իմ տատերս բավականին լավ մարդ է, բայց իր քրոջ աղջիկն է շատ է կռվել հետը, բայց շատ անամոթ մեկին է, չի լսում։ Ինձ խնդրեմ օգնեք ինձ։ Կամ հետո վարսեմ, որ արժեք 1,200 կարող ինձ տուն տամ, ցույցին 1,100։ Ով ինձ 1,100 տուն կտա։ Արդեն $100 շատ ացրել է ինձ։ Խնդրեմ ինձ օգնեք։ Էլ ոչ մի բան չեմ կարող անում։ Արդեն տարիք սպասա եւ հիվանդ կերեմ։ Այսպես բան ես չեմ ձեր կյանքից մեջը։ Այնքան անոթ է, քանի անգամներ ասել ենք բան, տանտերս էլ ասել է, բայց փուչ չի դարձնում։ Ճիշտ ինտանս կողքին։
Hasmik, we have taken your card and your address, and the inspector will come out. You want to translate for her so she knows that we'll look into that. Okay.
Thank you.
Haset Motsa.
Kachik, followed by Fred Sutton.
Bayırgonzes, ես Խաչիկ Ղազարյանն եմ։ Ինձ սեյշենետ տվել են եւ չեմ կարողանում տուն վարձեմ։ Այդ մեն որ տան վրա որ վարձեմ $1,500 ինձ փող են ուզում։ Հետո առաջվա մեկ տարվա փողն ինձ սեյշենետը տվել է $918։ Եվ ես չեմ կարողանում այդ $500-600 տամ։ Ես ինքս ստանում եմ $640 սիտից, փող եմ ստանում։ Ես թոշակառու մարդ չեմ, թոշակ չունեմ առայժմ ես, ու չեմ կարողանում աշխատեմ։ Ես վիրավորվել եմ գործից տեղն և դուս եմ եկի, չեմ կարողանում աշխատեմ, և չեմ կարողում այդ տունը վարձեմ ինձ համար։ Այդ մեմ սնգլն էլ $1,100 է ուզում, և մնացածն էլ մեկ տարվա փողը ուզում է ինձանից։ Ես խնդրում եմ օգնեք ինձ։ Ես շատ շնորհակալ եմ Ամերիկայի պետությունից, որպես մեզպես մարդկանց օգնում է։ Ես շնորհակալ եմ ձեզանից։ Մերսի, շնորհակալ եմ։
Fred Sutton, followed by Teresa Lalinkajian.
Hello, Council. My name is Fred Sutton. I'm here on behalf of the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles and our members here in Glendale. Thank you very much to the Council and the Housing Department for taking up this issue. We are excited to see the city looking at serious and workable solutions to help address the lack of housing throughout the Southland and here in Glendale. We're supportive of exploring many of the points in this plan. On initial review of the proposed amendments to the Just Cause for Eviction ordinance, we look favorably and there appears to be promise. But we encourage you to consult and engage owners further as you flesh out possible proposals as it relates to the item. However, providers are very concerned and opposed to the implementation of an annual inspection program. It is unclear how a discussion on affordability has led to possibly directing manpower and resources to create a new program when there is currently a complaint-based system in place. Perhaps we can see how we can strengthen the neighborhood services program that's currently in place, analyze the awareness, look further into how that program can be strengthened. In many cities, we have seen these types of programs. Some of them have worked great. Some of them have gone well beyond their mandates. So we're very excited to see what comes from this 8-point plan. Respectfully ask for point 8 to be removed as it doesn't appear to be related to affordability or the present discussion. And we also encourage you to keep housing providers involved in these ongoing discussions. And thank you for all your time and hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. Teresa? Therese? Yolan Kajian?
Paripses. Իմ սիրտս ամեն ուպես վիրավոր է եւ չեմ գնալ խոսել ավելի լավ է որ եթե հարմար կտեսնեք ես ալ պետք ունեմ ինձ տվեք եթե ոչ ինչ կրնամ ասել արդեն յուր կինես ամեն բան չեմ գնալ ես խոսել որ սիրտս ակնու վրա եղավ շնորհակալ եմ
Yelene Karbzanian. Followed by Mary Armakanian.
Can you not have full conversations?
Does he have a phone?
Բարի եկոծես, ես երկար տարիներ 20 տարի ապրում եմ Glendale-ում, ստանում եմ section-ներ, ափսոսում եմ, որ Glendale-ից չեմ կարող գնամ որտեղ rent control չունի բարձրացնում է տանտերը, իրավունքն որտեղ կենտրոն տեղ եմ ապրում, Wilson-ի վրա է, 1100-ից ավել չի տալիս section 8-ը, դե ստիպված եմ երբ գնալու, բայց ուր գնամ, չեմ ուզում Glendale-ից որտեղ գնամ։ Եթե հնարավոր է rent control եթե կլինի, տվեք, եթե չէ, չգիտեմ, կամ մեծահասակների տուն եթե կա, կարող եմ գնամ մեծահասակների տուն, բայց չկարողում այնտեղ փակել։
Can you please turn the phone off or take it outside? I'm sorry. Okay, sorry.
Շատ շնորհակալ եմ Glendale-ից, շատ լավ տեղ է, շատ լավ մաքուր քաղաք է, չեմ ուզում այստեղից գնամ։ Ուղղակի rent control չկա, չգիտեմ, ուրիշտեղ կարող եմ գնամ, մեծահասակների շենք եթե լինի, կգնամ, բայց չկա, զբաղված է բոլորը։ Շնորհակալություն։
Mary? Mary Armakanian? Satanik Martirosian?
Արեցես, հարգարժան ժյուրի, ես ապրում եմ Glendale-ում 118-ից Palmer, Վարչով եմ ապրում, ինձ թորնիկս օգնում էր վարձը տալու համար, բայց նա էլ գործը կորցրել է, հիմա չի կարող։ Խնդրում եմ ինձ օգնել կամ section 8-ով կամ մեծահասակների որևէ շենքում, այս որտեղ որ կառուցում եմ, որպեսզի կարողանամ ապրել։ Շնորհակալ եմ ուշադրության համար, ձեր վերաբերմունքի համար։
Saul Perez Matatian? Sandra Chandler? Yes.
Good evening, council members, Mayor Devine. I own a building in Glendale, beautiful Glendale. I noticed the change when I had a building in the San Fernando Valley where it was rent control, systemic code enforcement. It was a real jungle out there. And I just feel that the systemic code enforcement would be counterproductive. I just would like to request that you not penalize all owners in search of that habitual offender who I don't even know if it exists anymore, because with the prices that we pay for our buildings now, we have to keep up with the taxes and the the big repairs that we have now, they're so high, and the market value, actually. And I just feel that I'm just requesting that you consider that the buildings are a lot of times the retirement, our retirement. And it just puts more pressure on people that have a lot of responsibility as far as the financial end of running a building. And also it invades the privacy of the resident at the time that really doesn't want strange people in their units. And there is a way for them to call if they don't trust the landlord. There is a way for them to call and get someone to come out. I just can't imagine a landlord with leaks and a higher water bill just letting it go. Because I freak out if my water bill goes up. I inspect all of my units to find out who has the leaky toilet, because I don't want my water bill to go up. So I'm constantly in a panic because I'm looking out for, the leaks, any leaks that I may have, which my apartments are in perfect condition. But please don't penalize landlords that are good landlords just looking and search for that one, habitual offender. And I thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much. Roar Malekian. Roar Malekian. Okay, thank you. Aganes Bagjan. Not here? Okay, Herbert Milano.
Good evening, Mayor Devine, members of the City Council. My name is Herbert Molano. I'm here speaking as the Executive Director of the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles. I want to say to you that we appreciate the level of study that the Housing Department has done with regard to your report. We find that many of the 8 points here are worthy of consideration. I want to give you a little bit of history briefly. I was very much involved in 2001 when a similar situation occurred, and the same forces that were causing the rent increases then are the same ones that we see today. But I'd like to present to you a point of contention with regard to Part 8, which is to ensure safe and decent sanitary housing. I made a California Public Records Act request to see how extensive that particular problem is, and I got a reply from the City Attorney's Office that the process of obtaining that data was too laborious and they couldn't comply with my request for information. So I will tell you what happened in 2001. During a meeting of which I participated continually, where we requested the number of buildings that were in trouble, say continually deficient with regard to their service, we found that there were 60 buildings, and generally there are two buildings per owner. So basically 30 individuals who were the continual, habitual problem landlords. Many of those buildings, I believe, have been sold in the past 10, 15 years. So I believe that the number exists, but I don't believe that it's so extensive that it requires a type of systemic inspection program out there. The question for me is to ensure that we participate, if we can, in this process so that we can shed more light into our experience. I think that there are many opportunities for us to partner with the city, especially in promoting Section 8, because I think it's one of the best run programs on Section 8 in Southern California. Thank you very much.
Moses Carbidian.
I'm sorry, I can't speak English very well. Ես հայերեն խոսամ։ Մեր տունը 215 նորդ Բելմոնտի մասին եմ խոսում, 30 հատ յունիտ ունի։ Էլիրա լրիվ տուների մասին չեմ ասում ոչինչ, մենակ մի հատ պրոբլեմ ունեմ, ես 2 տարի հիվանդ եմ պահում եւ չեմ աշխատում, բայց խնամակալը ստանում ենք, իրան թոշակ տալիս են, բայց մինչև այսօր հազիվ չենք հասցնում, պարտքով ենք ապրվում, բայց հիմա մի անգամից մեր համար $600 նորից դրել են վարձի վրա եւ էլ չեմ իմանում ինչ անեմ, 2 հատ երեխա ունեմ։ Ես չեմ կարող գնամ օտար տուն վարձեմ, որովհետեւ հիվանդս սպեշիալ է։ Շատ շնորհակալ եմ, merci. Thank you.
Joseph is a Gulian. Okay. Levon, Gabrulian. Rasmik, Kaiser. Maybe it's your Kaisian. Nope. Tamara, more, let's see, it's more Sessian. Followed by Greg Astorian.
Արերեկո այսօր ոչ մեկի չեմ տեսել միջև սկսվելը, բայց որ պիտի բարևը։ Ռեդ կտրոլը անհրաժեշտ է, դրա մասին խոսք լինել չի կարող։ Դրանից բացի ես առաջարկում եմ, ոնց որ թեդերը, երբ որ տունը վարձում են, իրաց չեքափ է դադում, ոնց է։ Իշտ է չեքափ հարմզանը։ Հս կրիդիտը, դեցել ընդունեք, որ City Attorney Office-ը չեկապ հադի բոլոր լենդլորդներին և այսօր շատ հոգնած եմ, լենդլորդերից և մենեջերներին դեցվոր, որովհետև իրաց մեջ կան խաբեբաներ, խուլիգաններ, կրիմինալ էլեմենտներ, այդ բոլորը թեդետները չգիտեն, միջև տունը չեն վարձում։ Ուրեմն պետք է բաքգրաունդ չեք անել բոլոր տան տերերին։ Հետո տունը վարձելուց առաջ թող տան տերերը ունենան այդ տան ինսպեկտորի Իմիջայլոց իրեց օֆիսը շատ վատ է աշխատում, ես չէի հասցնում կա իստեղ բողոքեի Մարտեսյուի վրա, Ջոնը արդեն զանգահարում էր Մարտեսյուին ասում էր, Մարտեսյուն էլ չէր թաքցնում, ասում էր Ջոնը զանգահարեց, ինձ ասեց, դու գնացել ես Սիթի բողոքել ես։ Դες չպետք է աշխատեն, պետք է դες աշխատեն, որ շենքը, ապարտմենտը շնորհքով լինի, վարձել ինչ անպայման է, մի տարի լիսից հետո բարձրացնել անպայման։ Այդ հարցի վրա էլ ուշադրություն խնդրում եմ դարձնեք։
Greg Astorian, he left.
Այսօր խոսվեց, sorry, լենգվիչի մասին, հայերեն ու իսպաներեն, թարգմանիչ, մի հատ դրեք, եթե չգիտեք ոնց անեք, որ ձրի լինի, ես ձեզ կասեմ ոնց։
Thank you.
Եղավ?
Gone. Okay, that concludes the cards that I have. So I'll open the discussion to the Housing Authority and City Council. Would anyone like to begin?
I'm just going to throw out a few things. Well, thanks for everyone for coming, and I think that the people who came with specific complaints about code enforcement for their property, I believe we took the cards and we'll be sending an inspector out. And I do think that hopefully we can do some more outreach like we did several years ago and let the tenants know that this is an available service for them. I would like, whenever this comes back, for us to get information about alternative living for the ages. I don't know whether we participate in that program. Does anybody know here in Glendale? Any of our housing people? So alternative living for the aged is a program that a lot of cities participate in, and it encompasses many different things, but the main thing that they do is they match seniors to live together. So if somebody is living in a house and they're elderly, they help bring in people to live with them to help absorb the costs and keep them from being lonely, and then can deliver services to them, whether it's Meals on Wheels or transit in a more effective way. And they do the same thing with people living in apartments. So if you have a senior who's living in a 2-bedroom apartment, they help them find a senior roommate and provide services to them to help defray the costs. And it's been done with a lot of success in the city of Los Angeles and other places, and I think it's a program worth us exploring. I would also like to see a group of stakeholders put together so that when this comes back, whenever it comes back, we have input in a more directed fashion from tenants and from apartment owners so that we can develop policy that actually works for everybody. One thing I wanted to mention, I mentioned this last time, is the connection between new construction and rents. I don't believe the hypothesis that when you build a new building, that's a market rate building, that everybody else just goes and sort of raises their rent as a response, and that if you didn't build, that those rents would have stayed low. Certainly in areas where there hasn't been building, we're seeing increases in rents, just the way we're seeing it here. So it's just factually not accurate that in communities around the Los Angeles region that haven't built, that the rents have not gone up. In some places they've gone up much more. And in cities that haven't built, cities that have very restrictive zoning that are desirable, rents are certainly skyrocketing. And I mentioned my friend who lives in the Bay Area and how they're paying, I think they're paying $6,500 a month for a 3-bedroom apartment, which is typical for the Bay Area. And it's an area that's known for not having added a lot of housing over the years. And I can just tell you, as a retailer, when I go to a show and I see someone that charges more than me, it doesn't make me want to reprice things. I just want to let the customers know so that they'll come and buy from me because I'm a cheaper alternative, maybe. Especially if they're selling something that is maybe a higher, it's a better product. We realize that. So really, that's all I have to say. I'm interested in the JCE revisions, the just cause revisions. I'm interested in ways of trying to incentivize property owners to have 1- and 2-year leases as opposed to month to month. Certainly we need to continue to try to build affordable housing, which is something that this council and this housing authority has been very aggressive over the years in doing, given that there's a finite amount of money available to do it and a finite amount of land. We've been looking at all kinds of ways to bring more revenue into our housing authority, into not just building new apartments, but in renovating, purchasing older units ourselves and renovating them and making those available, which is sometimes a lower cost alternative. But a lot of the people that were here, it seems, were speaking more about code violations than they were about affordability. So there's some different issues here, and I think this is a great start from staff and very comprehensive, and I think it's time to sit down with some of the stakeholders and see what we can develop that's meaningful, that helps with some of the rent issues and with the code enforcement issues.
Thank you. Next? Okay. Garpetian, do you want to go next? He wants to hear you. Sparazian, are you ready?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
I don't think this is not about workforce housing. This is not about South Glendale. This is a citywide issue. It's not about affordable housing. This is about predatory way that rents are going up. I have a notice here. Let me just read this to you so you know where I'm coming from. December 9, 2015, rent went up from $975 to $1,495. And in May 1st, 2016, from $1,495 to $1,995. So within 6 months, they increased the rent by 100%. I'm just giving you a 10% discount. 100%, 110%. So this is what we're talking about. I'm not talking about anything else. I know we can't build 10,000 units affordable housing. I know we can't. There are so many things we want to do, but we cannot do. Also, this is another one that rent went up from $975 to $1,550. I mean, tell me if anybody in this room can adjust to a $600-700 increase within 60 days. This was my issue from the day one. So my suggestions are as follows. And also, if you want to talk about the 8-point presentation that we had, the inclusionary housing, the development impact fees, we missed the boat. That 4,200 units that is being built right now, none of them fell under this 8-point suggestions or ordinance that we want to bring up. So they went under the radar. Now, by putting an inspection or development impact fee on infill projects of 8 units and 10 units, again, because of a big problem, we're trying to squeeze the little guy who wants to build 8 units. And I heard what you were saying about your units, that the lady who spoke, that you keep your units in a top shape and your rents are maybe below market so you can keep your tenants, and I really appreciate that. But you have nothing to worry about. What we talk about here is not people like you. I wish a lot of landlords were like you. But as you saw, this gentleman was here, $600 rent increase. This is the problem that I'm facing every day. So I think I have my notes here, not in a particular order. When you give an incentive of 100 units per acre versus 43 units an acre, and you don't get inclusionary housing or development impact fees, you miss the boat. So we can't go back to that right now. Everything else, I will talk about the 8 points, but I want to make some suggestions. I think if you can, I don't know if you can enforce it or not, I don't know if it was legal or not, to, when you sign a lease, you will have maybe 2 options, or if you can have, like if you go rent an office building right now, rent an office, the lease tells you have 1-year lease with 2 options, 2 1-year options, and it tells you what your increases are. So you can set your life for 2 or 3 years in advance. If that's something we can do, I think we need to look into that. Also, if you are increasing the rent by a certain percentage, maybe 8% or 10%, and the tenant cannot pay and they have to leave, you have to pay a portion of the relocation fee. It's the same way with just cause eviction. If you want to take your rental units off the market, you pay 2 months' rents to get your tenants move out, and this is the same thing. Give incentives to local infill development to develop ownership housing, because if you build more ownership housing, the rental units will open up, and that will help the rental market. The units that are coming on the market, they're not helping the crisis that we have, because the rents are so high and everybody else follows that trend and increases their rent. Usually if you have 10,000 people looking for apartment buildings and 4,000 units are coming up, it has to be absorbed fast and it has to help your real estate crisis basically, but that's not what it's doing. It's just keep increasing. Rents are creeping up because of the high rents of the new units. Let's not kid ourselves. I think that's the way it is. I think we need to come up with a solution to take the load off of the people who cannot adjust their life within 60 days to pay $500, $600, $700 or $1,000 more rent. That's what I'm here. That's why that's my thing, because I cannot adjust to that. I mentioned this. If the interest rates go up 2%, half the people who own homes today, they're going to be in trouble because they can't pay their mortgage. It's the same thing. It's the same concept. I understand. I'm in real estate business. I'm a broker. My friend Greg Astorian is here. and he's giving me the eagle eye. I know that. If I'm talking about this issue, believe me, there is a problem. There is a problem, and we cannot ignore it. We cannot sweep it under the rug. We need to address this issue. And it's not about freezing the rents tomorrow. It's more people. The most complaints that I get from people is they cannot adjust their life to this huge increases, 30, 40, 50% within 60 days. And believe me, if you find a unit, let's say you got a 60-day notice, you find a unit in 2 weeks, you want to move, you can't. You have to give your landlord a 30-day notice. Then you have to pay rent here, pay rent on the new apartment to keep it for you, pay first, last, and deposit maybe on the new unit, and it's going to cost you $8,000 to $10,000 to move if you're lucky. People don't have it. That's the problem. So I'm going to stop here, Madam Mayor, and hear from our colleagues.
So, I'm sorry. We're here to discuss the solutions. Here are the solutions we have.
We have to acknowledge that there is a problem first, and then talk about the problem or the solution. The solution is, instead of, we talked about this, and we're going back and forth. Instead of giving 60-day notice, maybe you can give him 90-day notice or 120-day notice to give him enough time. Or maybe if you're increasing the rent by more than 8% or 10%, you have to pay a portion of the relocation fee. Or you can increase your rent once a year. How can you increase the rent 110% in 1 year and give 2 notices in 6 months? So these are the problem. If we all know what the problem is, let's talk about the solutions. These are the items I'm putting on the table. See if there's a
Well, I think when you look at the revisions to the JCE, particularly as we talk about year terms, I think that speaks to the frustration, the concern over somebody getting multiple increases in a given year. So we're trying to stretch that out, standardize that to the 1 year. With respect to the relocation, and I apologize if we missed something from the last meeting, part of the concern was if you were going to say if you exceed a 8 or 10% increase as a landlord, then you have to pay some degree of relocation to the tenant. That in some ways incentivizes the landlord to give an annual 7.9 or 9.9% increase just ongoing versus locking into a longer term. So to the extent that our goal is to first do no harm, to use a phrase, that was part of the discussion last time. If that's still on the table, by all means, we can throw that back on the table and let the city attorney opine as to whether or not we can do that. As I recollect from the first discussion, that was not impossible, but it did have its degree of concerns, because if it goes too far and it starts to look and feel and smell like rent control, then we have to call it what it is. And with respect with the suggestions, incentives to local, I don't know about the local necessarily, but certainly infill development, I think that's very much in line with the 8-point plan, as is the leases that are discussed here, especially the first version or first proposed revision to the JCE. I think there's already some commonality there, so it's good to hear you say that, and certainly wait to hear the direction from the rest of the Housing Authority. Because I think the frustration that we have is if it's not going to be rent control, and understanding that rent control doesn't do what a lot of people think it does, then you're really left with a finite number of things that we can do. And I think those finite number of things are listed here for you.
Some are more, but some not. I mean, we just keep bringing City of LA up and how well they're doing. The ordinances they have, and they also have rent control. We never talked about that. And on the second unit issues, I think there are one thing we can do. If you look at the audience that is here today, mostly seniors are in trouble first. Biggest complaint that I get is from seniors, and the issue of the second unit. There are so many. Granny units, if you will.
Granny flats, yes.
Granny flats, and they're not allowed to have a kitchen. Otherwise, they could be that. I'm not saying make it a B&B or whatever. Was it called?
Airbnb.
I'm not saying make it an Airbnb because I don't want that either. But there's so many families that they have their maybe grandparents or their parents or their family members who can live in those units, but because it doesn't have a kitchen, it doesn't serve them. Maybe that's one thing we need to look into our code to allow some of them to have a kitchen, to be. I mean, the structure is there already to use it as a granny flat, for example. There are so many things we can do, but the desire has to be there.
Well, I mean, to the extent, I respectfully would submit that the desire has been there because for this council, previous councils, this is very much a carbon copy of a discussion that took place almost 20 years ago. And to the extent that unless you're willing to go all the way to rent control, understanding that it doesn't quite get you what you think you want to get, there are that limited, finite use of things to do. Because if we were to go and say, let's go granny flats, where is the area where you're going to see the greatest proliferation and utilization of those granny flats? It's going to be in R1 zones. And so if you're going to, and because we're talking about this is a citywide issue, it's not a South Glendale issue, well, then in Northwest and in Ross Moyne and in Chevy Chase Canyon, we're going to facilitate, possibly even incentivize folks to put that second unit in there. I would suspect, based on previous discussions this council's had, and certainly direction I've received, that is not necessarily where you want to go. But if that is the discussion you want to have, by all means, it's a very easy discussion to have, but I think that invites a whole host of other challenges that you'll be hearing about. And again, it gets back to that notion of first, do no harm. I think everybody here is empathetic. You can't have a heart or a head and not feel the pain of many of the people that were here speaking, have spoken previous meetings, and who I see coming to see you regularly, sir, because you are there in that office. You take every one of those meetings that comes, and you wear it on your sleeve. And I know you see and feel that pain. But we still have to craft policy that works on many, many different levels. That's the hard part. That's the frustration I feel from you, and I appreciate it. I really do.
I actually wanted to just kind of piggyback on what you said about the JCE, the Just Cause Eviction revisions, that although it's not rent control, it at least provides a certainty in a rent schedule for at least a year, and it could be even up to 2 years. So that gives some predictability to the renters. So anyway, let's hear from my other colleagues.
I'll make a very short statement. There's absolutely no uncertainty about the fact that there is a housing shortage crisis, not only in Glendale, but in Southern California in general. It's clear that these rents, in many instances, are out of control, as demonstrated by the examples that Councilmember brought. I've seen the same letters that he's talking about. I have to meet with residents every week with the same problem, with the same issues. So let's just get this straight once and for all. Yes, there is a huge problem. Clearly, it is there. I thought we're here to discuss solutions. I didn't know that I'm here to hear about the problem that I know exists. I don't need that. So let's discuss solutions. That's where we're at.
Who would like to, Ms. Parazian?
I would like to thank everybody, the good-hearted donors that are here, and all the people that are here. So, but a lot of things was said. I agree with a lot of them, but I wanted to touch an issue that exists, and it bothers me, and it's under the rug, like Mr. Karapetian liked to say. Some tenants, most of them, they're afraid to ask the owner to come fix something, do something. They live in those ugly, just dirty conditions because they're afraid that the owner will increase the rent.
Thank you. Please don't comment. Let her speak.
That's all. Thank you.
So may I ask from my colleague, what are the solutions that you think?
Frankly, we have an 8-point plan. Yeah, we have an 8-point plan, so that's what staff has recommended. I thought that, you had asked for this, and you had asked for rent control. So that's why I'm here. We kind of touched lightly upon rent control. Is that something that we're pursuing, or we're not? I think that's the point that the city manager is posing. Are we pursuing rent control or not? If not, are we pursuing any of these 8 points that's being proposed by staff?
It's 8 points. We can talk about the 8 points, and I will tell you what my what I agree or disagree with the 8 points. But these are good plans, but they're very long-term plans. Yeah. This is nothing immediate, nothing that can help people who are in crisis today. So, I'm reading over this just cause eviction. The first year, okay, the one that says the second year has to be determined. Is this? Let's say I have a month-to-month lease right now. Is it going to be mandatory for the tenant for the landlord to give me a year lease today and not keep me month to month if I don't want to be month to month, and determine what my rent is going to be next on the 13th month?
That would be the intent and effect of it, yes, to require the landlords to provide a lease for 1 year with an option for a second year. And in both, the first year obviously would have the rent set, and the second year option would have the rent schedule set for that second year, so the tenant knows up front what those rents are going to be.
Okay, and how about the noticing from 60 days? Could that be, because I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, that you said it cannot be 120 days because that would be against the law. Is that
the area of noticing is preempted by state law. So it is anything over 10%, 60 days, anything under 10%, 30 days.
So if it's 60 days, could there be a 60-day option to extend it or not?
You mean the lease?
No, the notice.
For month to month or for a
the 60-day notice that they give them, if they cannot find a place in 60 days, is there a way to increase that the number of days to 90 days or another, to have another 60-day option if they cannot find a place to move?
If I can, the options that we set out were, the first, to give some certainty for a year. The second was to include an option. Exactly the description you gave when you referred it to commercial property. You enter into a lease, and in a commercial property it might have more options, but that would give you an option. The third is to provide some incentive so that no option, but I'll give you more notice. We have to make that an incentive. We can't require that.
Okay.
That's how those three proposals work.
Okay, so far, the only immediate solution that we may be able to have is a 1-year lease with a second-year lease option that indicates what your rent is going to be second. Am I correct?
Well,
so for that, I mean,
you could immediately have an incentive for owners to give more than 60 days. That's at their option, so you can't compel them.
What kind of incentive?
That is something we're looking into and have to develop. But for instance, the incentive to allow them to be excused from the just cause eviction, depending on what kind of funding we want to put to it, and if it is combined with an inspection program, you want to subsidize some of that if they do that. Those are things we want to know. Are you interested in us pursuing that?
All right. So I'd like to hear from my colleagues and see what they think.
Yes, Councilman.
Well, first, I want to thank Mr. Karapetian for bringing this back. You know, we had this discussion when I was first on council. I remember we had, kind of gone through this. And you're right, the housing issue has become a crisis in the area. And so I think it's really important that we have this discussion now. But I'm a little confused because I thought that, you definitely seem to have a goal here, and I'm just not really clear what it is from you, having brought this back. I understand you want to do something immediate, but we had a discussion a few weeks ago. We explored a lot of things. We have now an 8-point plan. But what is it that you're suggesting as the one who's initiated this at this point and been reaching out, I know, to a lot of these residents and speaking with them? I'm trying to understand what you would like us to do at this point.
Many of the residents are approaching me as well. Like I mentioned this, the biggest problem that I'm hearing from people right now is rents going up 30, 40, 50%.
Which we all know. So what's the solution?
Okay, you're all asking me what the solutions are. I kept repeating myself that the notice that you have to give, instead of 60 days, I want it to be 120 days. Give people some more time. Or if you find a place to leave or to move, you don't have to give 30-day notice to your landlord to move, because then it locks you in another 30 days in the same apartment that you don't want to be. And when you find another place, you can't just pick up and move. You have to give 30-day notice, and nobody's going to hold the apartment for you for 30 days. So I have to pay that rent over there and pay this rent over here, pay the relocation fee too. So in that case, maybe they pay the relocation fee for you to move if the rent is being increased, I don't know, more than 10%. So they will pay part of the relocation fee, which is part of our just cause eviction, which if you want to take your unit off the market, you have to pay 2 months rent to the tenant to move. So that is in the law already. And also, there's so many things that we talked about. I'm going around the same circle. But the goal is right now, how would you feel if your rent or mortgage is doubled in 60 days? I mean, I'm asking the same question to myself. I can't afford it. So what am I going to do? Nothing. I'm being caught between a rock and a hard place. So that's why they're here, not just these people, and people who come here and visit all of us every week. So what I'm saying is we have to find the inclusionary housing. It's not going to work. The inspection point that you have to go inspect all the properties. These are extra things. It's not going to help your housing crisis. And did I have it?
Well,
development impact fee at this point is not going to do much because development impact fee is just going to go after the smaller developers here, the ones who kept these infill properties for years and they want to build 6 units, 8 units, 10 units. Now you're going after them instead of we had all these units that we could have asked for development impact. So this 8-point plan we can talk about. If you want to talk about the plan, I can tell you what I feel about it. But as far as the immediate solution, again, the 60-day notice, if it can be increased, or you can give them a lease with 2 years options to know what your rent is going to be in next year or two, and also if you're more than 10%, you pay part of the relocation.
Can I ask the city attorney? Correct me if I'm wrong, but did you say it was a state law that with 10% they get 60 days? We can't arbitrarily increase that?
Let me just provide the background from the previous meetings that we had. So we were asked, can the city require more notice than state law requires? And the answer to that is clearly no. The next question we were asked, well, can we require that if a landlord proposes a rent increase of 8% or 10%, can we require that based on that decision, can the landlord or the tenant choose to relocate, and then part of that relocation cost obligation be borne by the landlord? And our answer was, the law is not clear. If you can do it, you probably want to do it on buildings that were built before, units built before 1995. And when we had that discussion with the council and the housing authority, I forget which meeting it was, but it appeared to us that there was no real movement on that particular item, that we were to bring back potential changes to the just cause eviction ordinance, which is why this report focuses on that. From our both legal, I think, and the professional perspective is that, as Mr. Ochoa has outlined, it would be very difficult to enforce the relocation requirement for the reasons that he just stated, and that's why the focus has been on just cause eviction. And with respect to the just cause eviction, we do feel you can require a lease for a year with an option for a second year, where all the rents within that 2-year period are set forth clearly in the lease and the option. So those are the options that we see for you as we speak tonight.
And just to clarify, with that scenario, are you saying that you would have the first year have a 1-year lease with an option, but then after that they could switch to month to month? Are you saying that every lease has to be a year lease? Or it can be either? It
would be a year. It would require the landlord only to offer the lease, right? And then also with that offer,
offered for the 1 year with
for the 1 year, but the offer would also have to include the option for the second year.
And then after that second year, what happens?
Then again, you can roll it as the city that we patterned this suggestion off of, at least that we know that's been upheld by one court, is Palo Alto. Again, once that lease is up, as a new period comes up, then another 1-year lease has to be offered. And again, so you can just keep going through that period. But again, at least it provides that for that period of time, the tenant will know what those rents will be for that period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I've rented a lot of my life, and I've actually never been in a situation where I didn't have to sign a one-year lease. I don't know whether it was required by law or it was just the preference of the particular apartment owner. But I'll just ask Mr. Garpetian again, because you were saying that you seemed frustrated, which I understand because I'm frustrated too, and you said you didn't want to sweep it under the rug, and I just want to be clear, we don't want to sweep anything under the rug either. We're, I think, all going through this because we want to find a way to try to help our constituents here and the people who are facing a lot of hardship because of what's happening with housing. So, if you have another idea beyond these 8 points, this would be a great time to let us know so that we can have a really comprehensive discussion and make sure that we do our best to address these issues. But I just want to repeat that no one's trying to sweep anything under the rug. We're here because we recognize this crisis in our community.
Thank you for that. I have a question on item 7, the 8 point. It says promote greater density in many parts of the city with the intention of increasing the overall number of housing units. Options include increasing FARs and height limits, reducing parking requirements, decreasing minimum unit sizes, and relaxing limitations on accessory dwelling units, allowing a second unit in residential property. Isn't this the same thing that I was talking about, the granny flat, or this is only for the multi-residential?
These are all for discussion for council. Truly, if the council said, let's go do a granny flat ordinance in a citywide focus, that is what we would do. You are the policymakers. We don't necessarily think that it makes a whole lot of sense considering some of the blowback that we're likely to get, but at the end of the day, we abide by what you want. These are all of the items trying to be as inclusive as possible, trying not to leave anything on the cutting room floor. These are all the different iterations of these various suggestions.
Because I don't remember that myself talking about second units or granny flats or.
Mr. Kelly.
I have a few things to say. One is, where did I put it? Oh, changes in just cause eviction. I think that's a fantastic idea. I think that's a tremendous recommendation. I don't believe RSO, rent control, is the answer for Glendale, based on my own personal research and study. Number 3, an unbelievable amount of time and research went into this 8-point plan. Commissioner Parazian and myself both met with Mr. Lanzafame a few weeks back. Revisions were coming in by the moment. These are the answers. I believe the answers are in number 3, and which is continue affordable efforts, parentheses, development, section 8, density bonus program. And in a report from staff, continue boldly with existing affordable housing programs and projects through the city housing authority operations, section 8 rent. I think the answers are all there. I think the answers are up here. I know Mr. Ochoa contributed a lot to this study. I do believe all the answers are right there. So I just think it's a great report by Mr. Lanzafame and Community Development.
Thank you. Councilmember Sinanian.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the frustration that I'm feeling from all of my colleagues is caused by the fact that we realize the immensity of the problem and realize the limits which are there for us in terms of imposing solutions to this problem. Again, the market is dictating these prices, and it's hard to go against the market. We've continuously engaged in efforts to increase our low-income housing stock, and I think staff made the comment at one point that never in Glendale's history has there been this much resource and attention diverted towards low-income housing. And that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's a reflection of responsive elected officials, responsive governance that's able to see how serious the problem is and is trying to address the issue in that way. Now, that is not the only way that we'd like to address the issue. I know that a lot of the solutions that are listed in this eight-point plan don't provide immediate, instantaneous solutions and satisfaction to the problem. And I'm racking my brain. I'm trying to think of what solution would provide instantaneous relief, short of just telling landlords, nope, you can't increase the rent. That's something we can't do. This is America. You can't do that. Even if, let's say, tomorrow, theoretically speaking, the city of Glendale were to institute rent control, the rents would be frozen at what they are now. So the rent that you're unhappy with, that would be the rent that you'd get stuck with. So even that wouldn't provide instantaneous, immediate resolution to the problem. Now, I am wholeheartedly supportive of what Councilmember Garpetian is proposing in terms of the JC revision proposals, including whatever recommendation he's making in addition to what staff's recommending, to the extent that City Attorney's Office supports those changes and finds them to be lawful. In terms of the development impact fees and inclusionary zoning ordinance, I understand that indeed, had we implemented affordable housing impact fees 5 years ago and adopted an inclusionary zoning ordinance, we would have been reaping the benefits of all that for the last 5 years at the time when a lot of massive development took place. It didn't happen, so we just have to deal with the reality of the fact that it didn't happen 5 years ago. But it doesn't mean that implementing that today, adopting those measures today, is futile, because I'll remind everyone that as horrible and as scary as the 4,000 units sound to a lot of our residents, I think the downtown specific plan adopted a 6,000 number, correct?
I believe it's just over 5, yes. Close to it.
It's close to 6,000 units. So even if we don't have any development taking place this year or next year, it doesn't mean that, we have a window of opportunity for more units to be constructed. And when that does happen, it would be nice to reap the benefits of that by having an affordable housing development impact fee. And instead of then turning around, let's say 10 years from now, when all 6,000 units are built, and saying, oh, by the way, we missed a boat. We didn't gain anything from these 2,000 units. So a little forward thinking, I think, would be useful. And same applies with the inclusionary zoning ordinance. The other efforts in terms of more lobbying for low-income housing funding and all that, I don't even necessarily see the need for it to be part of this 8-point plan. I think that's just a policy that the city has adopted, and we're going to move forward with that no matter what. Because again, we do realize what's happening in the market. We do understand that if 50,000 people are moving to LA County every year and only 10,000 units are being built, the shortage is only growing. It's growing, and it's going to grow more, and the rents are going to go up more. That's just the way the market works. And I do commend the staff for being forward-thinking and saying, listen, if it seems like the housing stock ultimately, if you know anything about basic economics, supply and demand, housing stock is the problem. If that's the problem, then the staff is willing to be creative and work with council to increase that housing stock. Now, we're not talking about building 400 and 500 square foot little apartments for college graduates. We'd be talking about apartments that can house families. But that's another solution. Again, doing that responsibly, doing that in a manner that's well thought out is not a bad thing. Again, a lot of residents have a visceral reaction to any thought of any construction, any building happening. But I think that's unrealistic. Again, the numbers will dictate what we do in the next 10, 20, 30 years. People are moving in, and they just have nowhere to live. And that's driving the prices up. Unless we know that we can stop the migration into Southern California area, unless there's some magical, Someone has, yes.
Someone suggested last week we build a wall. I don't.
Oh, so there's that. Yeah, there's him, but I don't think he's going to be able to do that. So unless we can do that, which we can't, it's inevitable. It's inevitable. We are going to have to face reality at some point. So that's all I have.
Councilmember Friedman?
Yeah, I just want to say one thing. I'm on one of the boards of the Southern California Association of Governments, and really what you do at this group, which is called SCAG, is you go in for a few hours every month and you watch 2 hours of PowerPoints. I mean, that's kind of, a lot of what you do.
And I have to do this.
And Councilmember Snani does the exact same thing. And we've gotten a lot of analysis about what is happening with housing and what's happening with population. And I just want to point out that this growing population is not the result of people moving to Los Angeles, despite what people think. People do move here, but as many people kind of don't make it in Hollywood and move back out again. It really is a function of birth rates and people living longer. So it's our own kids and it's our own parents. So keep that in mind when you start pointing the finger and saying we shouldn't be accommodating them, because it's really about accommodating our own people from our own community.
Thank you. Thank you. Did you want to?
Yes.
Mr. Garpetian?
An 8-point plan. Items 1 and 2, I would vote for it if it's 30 units and up, not below them. I'm okay with item 3 and 4 and 5. Item 6, I like to have a discussion about the bond issue and how are we going to do it, if that has any support. Item 7, I think it's in there already, SB 1818. We can discuss it, but that ordinance is in there already. If they want to use that SB 1818, they can use that program to build affordable housing and get bonus density and parking reduction. Item 8, I'm against.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we have kind of a consensus here of what we're looking for. It is a complicated issue. It is it's distressing and frustrating to all of us. I think you can actually hear it in our voices that we want to do something. There is no immediate solution. There is no magic wand we can wave and say this problem is solved. So we have to take it step by step, and I think that using these 8 points, that it's a step forward, that we can begin to make an impact, a positive impact on housing here in Glendale. Rent control isn't the answer. I think from the staff's report, which was very good, and from what I've read and researched, it doesn't work. And so I don't think that's right for Glendale to address affordable housing. I do believe that 6 of the points I would be in favor of. I'm going to keep it short. I think numbers 6, 7 and 8. 7 is to promote greater density, and I think that would just create an adverse impact in the neighborhoods, which could least afford more density. And number 8, which is the business registration, that doesn't create affordable housing. We now have inspectors that can go out. I think tonight we've demonstrated to all of you that we do have those inspectors. We do have that program. If you have a problem at your apartment building, please call a city. Let us know. We will help you. That would be my suggestion for the future. I also want to urge and make sure that we use, consult and engage landlords in whatever plans we move forward with, that they should be involved in, and I think to involve the associations and the tenants' real estate as well. And that would be my take on this motion. So I wonder have we given staff the direction that you need? Yes.
Refine these matters further and possibly bring them back by way of the discussion about the threshold for Mr. Garpetian's suggestion on the first 2 items over, so they're projects of a certain size, greater understanding of the mechanics of what a bond could be or not be, and that more understanding or maybe less support for number 7, greater density, and it sounds like there's consensus on no business registration fee inspection program for multifamily.
On number 7, there was no. I don't think there was any support for that. The density, the increase in density?
No, I was supportive in theory if it's done responsibly.
Let me make one clarification. That item number 7, when it's in bold, if you have it, you can put it up. When it's written in bold, then underneath it says that this is a multi-residential zone. It's not in residential neighborhoods or R1 neighborhoods. So it's not that we want to trigger every house to go out and build a granny unit, basically.
Granny flats would only be in single-family neighborhoods. I mean,
Sorry?
I think granny flats really are for single-family
No, that's what I'm saying.
neighborhoods, not for multifamily.
No, item number 7 indicates that this is not for single-family residential. That's what I'm saying. But there are some multi-family residential neighborhoods that they have granny units.
Yeah, but they already can have them because they're multifamily. So there's no, you don't need to change anything.
Perhaps you can bring back a discussion on that one.
Yes, and no.
I think the point's well taken that you're looking at areas, and the whole point of that is that areas that lend themselves to maintaining what the density is right now, or possibly even through some very targeted, focused means allowing for a higher density. Now, maybe you don't change any of those plans, but we acknowledge we would do a PPD in those particular areas. You don't want to change the underlying zone, but you have a specific piece of property on a specific right-of-way where there's transit, there's parking, there's open space. It makes sense. That is basically what that's speaking.
We just don't want to compound or put a negative impact in that neighborhood on traffic and parking and all those others.
Yes, no, that's why it's focused on those.
Of course, it wasn't for single-family residential neighborhoods. It indicates in there that it's for multi-residential neighborhood, that they have that unit, but it doesn't have that second address. It has only one address, so you can turn that into a unit to legally rent it, if you will.
Yes, and so that's why I have that as additional information. I know you had said that you didn't, but I think there's some definition that can help make it a little more palatable. And then ultimately, if the council says no, council says no. But based on what you're all saying, that might be a way forward. And then the revisions with the JCE.
Yeah, that I also agree with because of the certainties.
So we can bring information back to you in a much more refined manner, but this helps immensely.
I also like to thank everyone for coming here tonight. Yes. Landlords as well. We always want to hear from both sides. We hear a lot from the tenants, but it's very refreshing to hear from landlords that they have good heart and they keep their properties in a good top shape and they're very fair to their tenants. So it's good to hear from you. And thank you for being here.
And thank you for being respectful. Appreciate that. So do we need a motion on the?
It would probably be a helpful motion, and it's basically, as Mr. Ochoa said, further refinement items 1 through 7, and the two alternatives on just cause. I mean, that's what I heard, and I think that's what.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
Second. Do I have a second? Second.
Well, hold on. Let's make sure council and housing authority. We should both do it from both, but I think the motion was for council first.
For council, so we need a second for.
Okay, and then we need a motion.
Roll call. Let's do roll call.
Roll call for council, please.
Wait, what exactly are we
Just
moving here?
further refinement on items 1 through 7, and then also the two options on just cause eviction on the leases.
And are you going to get together stakeholders?
That is part of the process.
Absolutely not.
I did ask for that. Yes, I did ask. Roll call, please.
The manager likes to joke.
Council members Friedman. Record reflect.
Sorry, people were speaking. Sorry. Yes,
we're voting.
Thank you. Garpetian?
Yes.
Najarian? Sinanian?
Yes.
Mayor Devine?
Yes. And for housing?
I'll make a motion.
Authority members Devine?
Hold on, we didn't have a motion.
We have a motion.
I have a motion by Garpetian, second by Kelly.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Authority members Devine?
Yes.
Friedman?
Yes.
Garpetian?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Najarian? Parazian?
Yes.
Chair Sinanian?
Yes.
And do we need, that's it. Okay, do I have a motion for adjournment?
For council?
I'll make a motion.
Adjournment, and then we're going to
We need an adjournment for the authority as well.
adjournment for the housing authority.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All right, we are adjourned.